listeners, I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I will say. My good friend.
And I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. And you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Pei, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Pei? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC
to use that information? Because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
Brother, good luck with everything.
You too, man. May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a tongue man too, so stop at that. Tell everybody you are a tongue man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more. Who've always aspired to do better. Who've always accepted that not necessarily young children go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can't pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say, we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I'm certainly happy that you can join us. And of course, before we continue, we want to take this opportunity to wish all the mothers of the nation a happy Mother's Day. Of course, the hands that rocks the cradle indeed rules the world. And none of us will be here without our mothers. That's just the circle of life. So please do not allow moms to cook today. Dads and kids, use this opportunity to really extend that appreciation and that love to your mothers, because I will tell you something, a motherly instinct is a very powerful instinct. And without our mothers, we would not be anywhere. I can speak to that of my late mother as well. So happy Mother's Day to all of you. And of course, welcome to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. The Bubb Report is streaming today from Grenada. I'm actually not in my regular studio in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, with everything that's happening in the world, with everything that's happening in North America, there is an extra special good feeling to be home at this time. But especially so because this year, the Bubb Report, actually this month, the Bubb Report will be celebrating its 5th anniversary with our inaugural Future Forge Summit that will be held at the Grenada Trade Center this coming Thursday, the 15th of May, starting at 6 p.m. with a cocktail reception, followed by 7 p.m. with a formal event. Now, the idea behind this, of course, which honors the Grenadian great broadcasters and journalists, Leslie Pear, Lou Smith, and George Grant, 3 gentlemen who I had the high honor and privilege of being tutelaged and trained by. The idea is to bring together Caribbean leaders, Grenadian leaders, thinkers, and experts from various disciplines to engage in deep discussions about the most pressing issues that are confronting Grenada and the Caribbean at this time. Now, the event will serve, of course, as a platform for exploring complex ideas, fostering understanding, and sparking innovative solutions to the challenges facing the Grenadian and the Caribbean civilization. As I said, the event will be held at the Trade Center Annex, kicking off at 6 p.m. with a reception, followed by a public lecture to be delivered by Dr. Didicus Jules. Dr. Didicus Jules will be our inaugural speaker for that event. And of course, it will also be sprinkled with some items of culture and entertainment. So we hope to see you at the Grenada Trade Center for this marquee event that we have happening. Now, folks, what we will do now, we will take a quick break and come back with the first segment of the Bubb Report, where we'll be having a conversation on crime, justice, due process, and the tragedy of Brother Wello from St. Mark, who died under some very tragic circumstances. And of course, that issue has been animating debate in the public space. So we want to have a conversation about that and what all that would look like for Grenada, of course, and the justice system moving forward. So we'll take a first break and come back right after this.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, before we go any further, I do encourage you to share this week's live stream. If you're joining us on Facebook, do us a favor by sharing the stream and, of course, liking the stream as well. If you're over on YouTube, currently we have 62 people on YouTube and growing. So for those of you who are there, please just hit that like button. If you've already subscribed, that's great. If you've not, we would encourage you to subscribe as well, so that others can have an opportunity to watch this week's program. Very important topic that we'll be covering this week, folks. And of course, an official from the Royal Grenada Police Force who shot a community member of Victoria during the celebrations of St. Mark's Day on the 27th of April. Of course, he was arrested and charged, and that is Police Inspector Kellon Noel, who was charged with non-capital murder in the murder of Wellington, in the alleged murder of Wellington Wello Welsh, who encountered severe injuries from that shooting incident that occurred in Victoria. Now, Wello lost his life on the 28th of April, 2025, after receiving treatment at the General Hospital, and he since succumbed to those injuries. Now, of course, Wello, as the reports indicated, was out on the road celebrating the St. Mark's Day Festival, which is an annual festival, and people in the community remember him as someone who was really embedded and grounded in the community. And the story goes that when the police official tried to manage the crowd, he allegedly pulled out his firearm and pointed it towards, allegedly, the direction of Wello, and shot him at close range. And of course, some law enforcement says that some sources that is in law enforcement is saying that the shooting was actually not intentional, but of course the evidence in the case would bear all of that out. And of course, we had to make sense of this. We had to make sense of the crime situation in the country and the whole criminal justice situation in the country. But before we do, I do want to play a comment that was made by the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Deacon Mitchell, during a brief meeting that he had with residents in Grenadians resident in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area during a meeting that he had with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He did have a town hall, well, I would say a meet and greet right after, and this is what he said. Let me...
St. Mark, which resulted regrettably in the death of one person and the injury of 3 other persons. And I'm sure you would have also heard that a police officer was charged with non-capital murder and 3 counts of causing grievous harm. By anyhow you view this incident, it's a terrible tragedy. It's a tragedy for law enforcement. It's a tragedy for the victims. And so we ask you to keep everyone in their thoughts and prayer. I am planning to visit the family. In fact, I was planning to visit the family tomorrow, but I think there are quite a few relatives in the United States, and they've asked that I delay my visit until they come. As I said, it's a very tragic situation, but it also means that I think from the RGPF's perspective, we expect they will review their protocols on use of firearms or force to make sure that officers are better trained to deal with the situations. But I also have to point out that this comes out of a tragic situation where there was ongoing bottle throwing and violence coming out of a social entertainment activity. And in a sense, it has all led to this unfortunate incident where perhaps the persons who started all of this themselves have gotten away. So it is something that we have to be able to talk about, how in a lot of these entertainment type events, how we are able to police and control the excessive drinking of alcohol, the use of glass bottles that become missiles, and frankly, how long these events go on. Because in some cases, they go on almost non-stop for 12 plus hours. You almost guarantee they will end in some sort of unfortunate incident. So it's not something obviously that I'm happy to talk about, but we have to be transparent. Obviously, the victims deserve justice. The police officer obviously deserves his day in court as well. And it means the system is working. And it also shows that the RGPF is not afraid to deal with its own in the event they found to be acting outside of the law.
And of course, so that was the Honorable Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell commenting on this case. And I'm now joined by Dr. Neil Streiton, who is, of course, a crime reduction specialist, no stranger to the Bubb Report, as well as Ruggles Ferguson KC, also no stranger to the Bubb Report. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. I didn't know that you guys knew each other, so that you guys started off on a good footing. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Of course. We know each other. We've done some work together. And I am, as a crime reduction specialist, and by the way, when I say that, people wonder what that means because they yes. think I'm a police officer, right? No, we do crime reduction through behavior modification. Oh. Through behavior modification. So we are not enforcers. We don't pull rifles and run behind anybody. We try to pull them to us and help them with the behavior. And by the way, in doing so, I've done work with Mr. Ferguson here, a man I really respect, a man that I know have the general public, Grenadian public at heart, and would go the extra mile to help. So it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure on this Mother's Day, and that's why I'm wearing red, by the way, Ruggles. I'm celebrating. My mom is turning 89 this year, and God has blessed her. So I'm celebrating my wife and my mom today.
Very well. I didn't know red was the color of mothers as well.
Well, I just say it's love. I just say it's love.
You just said love. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Ruggles, welcome, sir, to the program. Just unmute your mic, Ruggles. Unmute your mic.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Kellon, and special good morning to my friend Niels. And let me start off by wishing all mothers, biological and otherwise, those who take care of the children of the world, happy Mother's Day, especially enjoyable and stress-free day to day. And let me also congratulate you on your 5th anniversary. I think you have done a great job over the 5 years. My friend and your friend George Grant will be extremely proud of you. And again, to congratulate you, not just on the 5 years, but on organizing that signature event next week Thursday, because as you know, that I believe in public education, that is so important. It's an ongoing task. It's always a work in progress, and the greatest contribution we can probably make is to use our own talent and skills, whatever areas of expertise, to inform, educate, sensitize the public on issues. That always makes for a better and more stable society. So thank you for having me on. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes I am of the firm belief that we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And, Canadians talk about, the quality of media and the quality of journalism. So instead of me standing on the sidelines and just complaining about it myself, I said, well, I need to do something about it. Yes. And that is really, in essence, the genesis of the Bubb Report. Now, gentlemen,
and that's what we need.
Yes, Dr. Chatham, go ahead, sir. Yes.
And that's what we need, because we have so many critics around, but nobody's going to lift one finger to make it better, right?
Yeah.
And so I really applaud people that step out and say, no, I'm not just criticizing, but I'm adding my voice to it.
Absolutely, and that is so important. That is so important. Now, gentlemen, we are here for a very critical conversation this morning in the wake of the tragedy that occurred in St. Mark. But Dr. Chaitan, I want to begin with you because, of course, we have to make the point and preface this by saying the caveat here is that this matter is now sub judice officially, given that it has turned into a court proceeding. Yes. So yes. We would be very measured in respect to how we speak about this. But I do want to talk about some of the background context to this incident. The background context here was that there was some youth disturbance in the community. In fact, it is said that in the context of this event and in the context of other events like it, while these events are great, the distraction that comes into those events tend to be some of the vices that the Prime Minister speaks about that then leads to the kinds of violent and deviant behavior that allegedly we saw play out in Victoria. So let's begin there, especially in the context of your thrust, your efforts in reducing crime in the society.
Right, and Dr. Baba, it's well said, because many times what we do, we kind of look at the fruit, but we don't look at the root, right? And as I tell people, if the mangoes bring worms this year and you don't medicate the root and you think it's going to be different next year, you're crazy. It's going to happen again. So we must always medicate the root. As a matter of fact, I actually passed in Victoria just about an hour before the incident happened. I saw the crowd. I saw young people sitting on the side of the road, and I was praying that everything ends peacefully. I had no indication. I didn't see a brawl at that time. I just saw young people sitting, a lot of people sitting by the road. And I passed and I waved because, of course, you may have heard, and Mr. Ferguson, you know that I've done work in 8 communities around Grenada in the end part of 2024. So most of the young folks know me. And they waved me, and I was just saying as I drove back to St. George's, I hope this thing ends peacefully. Unfortunately, we heard what happened, and we saw the videos on social media, what seemed to be brawl, what seemed to be confrontations and what have you. One of the things that I must say, and I got to say tongue in cheek, but at the same time, be very careful, be honest about it, is Dr. Bubb and my friend, Mr. Ferguson, is I think what I see as the excessive use of alcohol in our community. please don't jump down my throat, listeners, but in 2012, there was a report, and I have it, by the way, painting Grenada as one of the islands with the highest per capita alcohol consumption. Why am I going backing up that tree? Because alcohol is something that causes people to behave probably out of character, and may give us results that we did not even plan for. And in these kind of events, and we have Carnival coming up soon and what have you, wherever there seem to be large crowds, it will seem that there is a presence of, an undue presence of alcohol, even with young ones, young teenage school children. And once we put alcohol or any kind of a drug, any mind-altering drug in the equation, we could expect any kind of behavior. So yes, it was celebratory, it was fun, but we have to look at the roots. We have to look at the roots of it. And I believe, Dr. Bubb and QC Ferguson, that we have to look at these kind of roots that would kind of alter behavior. Even learn good behavior becomes bad. And so we have to look at it. It just might be one of the issues that may have led. And I say that, as I said, tongue in cheek.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I do want to bring in Ruggles before we get into some of the more contentious issues around this matter. To talk about the work that I know that the Bar Association, following that uptick in crime that we had in our most recent memory, that the Bar Association essentially wanted to partner with different groups in the society as a responsible civil society organization to look at this issue of crime. What were you able to accomplish? And what was some of the findings, I suppose, that the Bar observed in your efforts to reduce or to help the society ameliorate those concerns of crime?
Yes. Well, thank you, Kalon. And that is a work in progress. You are referring to, of course, the Grenada Peace Initiative, in which the Bar plays a leading role and seeks to bring other critical stakeholders together, the unions, the chamber, other civil society organizations. And I must say that Dr. Chaitan himself plays a critical role in the whole development of that concept. It arose out of the shootings we had last year. There were several shootings following one after another and believed to be gang-related. And the GBA, Grenada Bar Association, therefore rose to that occasion and started the initiative. We have had a bit of a lull over the past few months, but I can assure you it is rooted, and it's something that will continue and will develop. And when we have experts like Dr. Chaitan involved, and I can tell you he's full of energy. Everybody thinks I don't know where I get my energy from. And when I say he has energy, because I've had opportunity to work with him on this particular peace initiative. We are both on the committee. Part of the challenge with the success of several of these initiatives is to really get others involved. You find in leadership the same names calling the same people, all busy people, having to be involved, and that's really one of the challenges. But it's continuing, and every time there is an incident, in fact, it pushes and reminds all of us of the need to continue our initiatives. And let me tell you what it includes, because as Dr. Chaitan said, it's really about changing the mindset. Changing the mindset. And youth on crime and advocating for youth, getting programs that will keep youth away from crime, utilizing the experts that we have, like Dr. Chaitan and others, to develop programs that would get youth away from crime. Because as he says quite rightfully so, when you have these activities and you have alcohol, mind-altering substance, the good behave bad. Even the good behave bad, and any little thing can spark a major issue which sometimes leads to tragedy. That's part of our reality. And then again, we have a relatively small police force that's lacking in resources, lacking in personnel. And we have great police officers. And many times, anything that happens, the police usually get the bad end of the stick because they are the ones expected to rise to the occasion, deal with the occasion, manage the occasion. And at times they may lack training. The whole emotions arising from the situation, they might find it difficult to manage themselves. So it all points to a discussion, and even more so addressing issues like resources for police officers, training for police officers, as the Prime Minister indicated, protocols on the use of firearms, issues of crowd control. Because when you have major crowds to deal with and a small, ill-equipped police force to deal with it, then it can lead to issues just out of the blue that we saw in Victoria, most tragically so. So it's a discussion. This discussion on crime, it's more about is much more than an event that happened, but really and truly, how do we address this issue in the short, medium, and long term to reduce crime, and more importantly, to divert the energies, the tremendous energies of our youth into productive activity. And I believe it can happen, and we just need the kind of strong initiatives and collaboration among organizations in order to achieve that.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and I like talking to theories, but I like to be anecdotal. Quick one. I was working in Grenville. Young man that was deported from the US. Of course, came back angry, came back disappointed, served time. And by the way, Mr. Ferguson, I've now created a whole strategy for the Caribbean in training people how to deal with deported criminals, the whole mindset and everything. And this young man came back and he was part of my program. And of course, Project Stop and Think. You sit behind my back here, always stop and think before you proceed. And this young man came to the program. What do you know? He built his little house. And he had his flat screen TV and everything. He worked. He's a tiler, very good tiler. So he's working and everything. And he came one day and one evening, and the house was broken into. And they cleaned him out. This guy's coming from a criminal background. And this guy was tempted to go and find who it is and deal with them. And he came on the block, and he was so somber. And Mr. Ferguson, he started to cry, because he knows what he could do, right, to take revenge. But he was taught to control himself. He was taught, stop and think about what's happening in the future. Think where you're going, man. You know what he said to me? He said to me, Dr. Chaitan, the guys on the block were laughing at me and said, this man, Dr. Chaitan, make you a little pussycat. Look at you. Instead of going and fight for yourself, it made you a pussycat. Well, guess what? He saved himself trouble. He's now working again. And he's buying back his TV. He could have gotten, so we have to look at the root of the thing, man, the behavior, the anger we see. What causes the anger, Dr. Bubb? Mr. Fox, so what is it that would cause a young man to have a gun in his hand. Because, Dr. Bubb, because listeners out there, the leadership in this boy was broken. Nobody to nurture it, nobody to help him to grow to be a leader. So when he has a weapon in his hand, he's told he's stupid, he's told he's a failure, he's told he can't do nothing, he's suspended from school, he's expelled, he feels like a failure, but he has firepower in his hand. He feels as he's a man now, he's the leader. Right, so we have to look at the root of these things, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. It's hard work, and QC Ferguson, you saw the results in the Olympic Center on December 1. We had 205 people from around the communities. It's hard work, Dr. Bubb. It's not sitting in an office and saying, "Well, we wish." It's grinding your knees on the curb. Sit down with these guys, listen to them cursing in your face and not taking it personal. Thinking, where could I take this boy to?
Yes, Mr. Ferguson. So let us now transition into a conversation. And of course, we will get back to Dr. Chaitan on the other current, ongoing, perennial, pressing issues of crime. In spite of the fact that we had a gun amnesty, in spite of the fact that we now have more draconian anti-firearm legislation, and we still have some of these incidents occurring, gun-related incidents and things like that. So, Mr. Ferguson, I want to begin with you here. I'll pick up with you here on this part of the conversation, and that has to do with questions of due process and bail. Now, one of the conversations that has been that has started to happen was that this officer, after being accused of non-capital murder, was able to apply for bail and get bail. So the question is, under what circumstances is bail, or what offenses are considered bailable in that context? And so can you articulate how a judge makes a determination? I'm not sure if a magistrate can also make that determination of what would be considered bailable versus what is not considered bailable.
Yes. Thank you, Kellon. In fact, this is a very important conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. I've done several programs in my other public education programs on bail, and it's something we need to continue to highlight. Now, due process. Remember, our Constitution represents our supreme law. The Constitution is the supreme law, and apart from that, we have other laws passed by Parliament that govern particular areas of life. Due process, Section 8 of our Constitution provides that every person charged with a criminal offense shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by a court of law, a court established by law. So, a fair hearing, that fair hearing must take place within a reasonable time. And that hearing is not a hearing on the streets, is not a hearing in a rum shop. It's a hearing by a court established by law. And that court, ultimately, after a hearing, finds, in accordance with the law, a person charged with a criminal offense determines whether that person is guilty or not guilty. So the criminal justice process starts usually with a complaint. Somebody makes a complaint. 1, 2 is followed by an investigation, and under our laws, the police are responsible for conducting investigations. 3, those investigations may or may not lead to a criminal charge being brought against an individual. 4, if a criminal charge is brought against an individual, then the next step, the police lay the charges, is that that person is then brought to court. That accused is brought to court, and if it is an indictable offense, because we have 2 broad categories of offenses under the criminal law. We have summary offenses and we have indictable offenses. The indictable offenses are the most serious offenses. And the indictable offenses have to be heard and determined in the High Court before judge and jury for those offenses. For summary offenses, however, the magistrate can conduct a trial and determine whether you're guilty or not guilty. So when somebody is charged, then the immediate thing, especially with an indictable offense, like in the instant case, because non-capital murder is an indictable offense. And for any indictable offense, after being charged, the issue would be 1, bail. Should that person, accused person, be remanded into custody pending the trial and determination of his or her matter? Or in which case, or secondly, let me deal with the offers, should that person be released on bail? Because usually the person is arrested and charged. Right. Now, let me make the point absolutely clear. And the foundation springs from the Constitution. I started with a due process point, which is what every citizen, irrespective of who you are, is entitled to. Section 8 of the Constitution, a fair trial within a reasonable time. And a fair trial comes with it certain processes and procedures as laid down by the law. The question of bail has to be seen in the context, again, of the Constitution, which is the presumption of innocence. The same Constitution, which is the supreme law, says every person charged with a criminal offense is presumed to be innocent until that person either pleads guilty or is found guilty by an established court of law. Therefore, anybody charged, anyone, is presumed to be innocent. A charge is not a conviction. A charge is what leads to a trial. And a trial, ultimately, at the end of the day, determines whether that person is guilty or not guilty. In the magistrate's court, the magistrate determines that. In a judge alone trial, in the High Court, the judge determines that. Or in a trial in the High Court that involves judge and jury, the jury determines guilty or not guilty. So the fact that you charge anybody charged is not guilt. Is not guilt. And therefore, at that stage, different considerations apply. For every offense, save and except treason, it's bailable, including murder. If you are charged with murder, it's a bailable offense. Because bail is not determining whether you're guilty or not guilty. Different criteria apply to the granting of bail. With the consideration for bail includes, for example, whether or not you will show up on your dates for trial, the days and times for your trial. Because if you're on bail and you don't do that, bail is simply revoked. If you are placed on bail and you don't comply with the conditions of bail, then bail is revoked. So you have that consideration, whether you will turn up for your trial, whether, very importantly, you are flight risk. In other words, whether if you are granted bail, and that usually happens when people come in from other countries and they are charged, they have other passports, the issue of bail could be a bit more challenging because that person may be viewed possibly as a flight risk. So you charge, you abscond, you go to a different country, you escape trial. A third consideration is whether or not, while you're on bail, based on your track record, you are likely to commit the same offense that you are alleged to have committed. So, for example, if somebody is charged for housebreaking and stealing, and that person have a string of housebreaking and stealing charges that they've been convicted on, and they charge again, then that person may have a challenge for getting bail, depending on the record. Are you likely, while you're on bail, to pervert the course of justice? In other words, interfere with the legal system in a way that would bring advantages to you? Are you likely to interfere with witnesses? These are the crime to be guilty or not, because it is a subsequent that, and you are viewed at that point when you are charged, you are clothed with the presumption of innocence. So you are presumed to be innocent. It's not that that you have been found guilty and then you let off into society. No, there is a trial process that follows, and therefore the considerations for bail are completely separate and apart from considerations of guilty or not guilty. That is why when, for example, you are found guilty of an offense, no, you are found guilty, and let's say you are sentenced to prison, but you have appealed the decision, it is then more difficult to get bail. The Court of Appeal may grant bail, but in exceptional circumstances. That's a different stage of the process. So in this case, somebody is charged with non-capital murder. It's a bailable offense. The question is whether or not he satisfied the criteria for getting bail. And another important fundamental principle of the law is that bail should not be used as a tool for pretrial incarceration. In other words, it must not be a tool of punishment because you have not yet been found guilty. Punishment follows a finding of guilt. And therefore, just having somebody on remand, at times for months and years, and then that person is found not guilty by a court. You know what has happened there? That person's freedom has been taken away for months and years. And the question as to whether they can sue the state, and many people feel that, listen, if I'm found not guilty and I was in prison, I was on remand, then I can sue the state for false imprisonment or denying me of my liberty. That does not automatically follow either. So it is in that context. Now, anytime there is a criminal offense, especially anytime there is a killing, it is natural to expect emotions to run high. That's quite natural. We are all human beings. On the other end of the scale, there is the due process point and there is the bail point. And that bail, what we have to get in our heads, It is not punishment. It is simply a determination that whether or not, and there's a presumption in favor of bail, only if it can be rebutted that that person will go and just commit a whole set of crimes in society, or that person will run away, or that person would not show up for his trial, then you refuse bail. Maybe I should stop at this point.
Yes, Dr. Chaitan, yes, if there's anything else.
Mr. Ferguson is a law lecturer. He did a good job explaining the primary, secondary, and tertiary grounds for bail. Mr. Ferguson, I've learned that myself from being in the court, right? But she did a very good job there. But you know, he made a point about, apart from the protocols, the legal protocols, you have the emotions running high, right? Where people, because remember, the victim is a member of a home. The perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator is someone from a home is connected to, a family, a community, and so emotions run high. And that is where my article, a warning, careful with the police. And by the way, that caption was, I worded that caption to be very provocative. Be careful with the police, a word to the wise. Because as I said in the article, I've actually seen where police get frustrated. I mean, it happened in the Toronto situation, 2010, 2023, it happened in London, England, where police put down their guns and patrolled without no guns because they felt they were unfairly targeted. And even if Dr. Bubb and Mr. Ferguson and listeners out there, in every discipline, we have rogue elements. Okay, we have rogue elements. We have people that would go out of control. We have people that are going to do things, and the result of the activity or whatever the behavior, it would paint a complete, all the colleagues, you know, with a wide brush. And that's what the article was saying. Because if we decide that we are going to just hate police, and you know, Dr. Bubb, this incident last weekend in Victoria came on the heels of what was happening in Guyana, for example, right? With all the police reaction or whatever in Guyana and the so-called alleged. So the environment was heavy, right? Heavy with police matters. And then you have an alleged police shooting, right? So it's very easy for the population to get emotional and turn on the police. And a lot of policemen that have done excellent work. And I said the vast majority, and not feel targeted, feel discredited because of what may happen, right? And even in Dr. Bubb, as you read that article, and I encourage readers to read it, you know, careful with the police, a word to the wise. Even, as I said, coming to the end of the article, as human beings, Dr. Bubb, even if it may not be a rogue element, all of us as human beings sometimes have a misstep. That's exactly what I said in the article. Just misstep. Something may have influenced us. Something, some memory, some word, some look may have influenced us. And even the best of us could lose control. And I'm not here arguing.
Dr. Chai, yes, but stick a pin, please. Let us talk about the police responsibility with respect to de-escalation.
Right.
And not drawing on your firearms. Again, I'm being very careful with how I frame this. Not drawing on your firearm as the first resort instead of the last resort. Are those conversations? Do you have those conversations with the RGPF in respect of de-escalating confrontations that law enforcement might have with members of the community?
Yeah, and Dr. Bubb, the truth about it is that even before this happened, the acting commissioner of police, Mr. Randy Carnett, reached out to me. He knows what I do, right? Because I have been running sessions in the training school, the police training school, dealing with emotional intelligence, confrontational control. And so I must say that the acting commissioner had reached out to me before for these kind of presentations and training for the RGPF. So you are correct. The first action is not to pull a weapon, is crowd control. But if we are not trained in crowd control, what's going to happen? We are going to pull the power, because when you have a crowd, out of control crowd, the person, the hero, the superhero that will control this crowd must know what they're doing, and must come from an advantageous point of view. I want to say advantageous. I don't necessarily mean powerful to take abuse, but be able to control. And if our police officers are not trained in that area, or if we do not have a team of officers that are trained in that area that we could call in, then it could quickly go downhill. So you are very correct when it comes to the importance of emotional intelligence, how to handle. And I just say, Dr. Bubb, because someone asked me the question, Dr. Chaitan, what is this going to do for police and community relationship? And I must shout out ASP Desmond Richards, who is head of community policing, because he's reached out to me also. Dr. Bubb, in my work with Project Stop and Think in 8 communities, I've asked the RGPF for officers that could work with me, officers that could let the guards down, officers that could go in the community and build relationship with me. I'm happy to let you know that I had the names and numbers. 461 Larry Williams worked with us and built an impeccable relationship with the community. 835 Corporal Kemba Kutain, again, an astute police officer, was able to work with us, come into the community, work with his young men, advise them, accordingly, hear the concerns. And we also have 403 Mickey Redhead, Corporal Mickey Redhead from Satez. This man came with us, sat in Guave, sat in Victoria, on the bench, on the curb, and talked to these young men, answer the questions about, thus forging greater community and policing relationship. And I applaud these officers. And so that's why I'm saying to us, we cannot paint the whole RGPF, because there are officers that are doing a good job. And even sometimes, as I said, as good officer, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Chaitan. Behind my head is Project Stop and Think, sentiments or concept. Stop and think. But even me sometimes, when I'm taken advantage of, when someone cursed my mother and I don't know what happened to Grenadians, the smallest child would curse your mother private part. When I'm cursed, you think my blood pressure don't go up too? You think I don't want to respond to? But I have to think about what my consequences could be. And so it's important that our officers are trained, and I applaud the RGPF for reaching out. They've reached to my office, my desk, and I'm willing to help.
Absolutely. Well, let's see where that will go, because I think that event has really shattered police community trust in many respects. Yeah. And Ruggles, it didn't help, quite frankly, when normally a perp walk is done with accused suspects, and media normally stationed in front of the courthouse. I remember that was my beat. I honestly did not enjoy court reporting, Ruggles. I'm just putting that out there. Because I just felt as if the court was just too restrictive.
I remember I was reflecting on you many years ago, Kellon, when you were in the trenches. Yes, you have been at it for a long time now.
Yes. And but in the context of covering court proceedings, the suspects are always, taken from a police vehicle, a prison vehicle, and they walk down the steps. In this case, that didn't happen. The suspect, we don't know where the suspect, the accused, we don't know how he entered the court. But again, that caused the public to say, well, outside of the fact that the bail was granted, that is there a double standard here in respect to how certain suspects are treated? So if the suspect, let's say, is from, I don't know, True Blue, would that suspect be treated differently? Let's say if they're from River Road or the environs of Saltfish Hall in Grenville. I don't know if St. Andrews, I don't know if Saltfish Hall is still a thing. But can you articulate how those decisions are made? I mean, I know you're not a law enforcement official, but have you seen that in the past?
Yes.
Where suspects are shielded from the
Yeah,
public
well, it
sometimes?
depends again. It depends. A lot of these issues are guided by security considerations. I'm not too sure what security considerations applied, but there are instances where you have accused persons, and sometimes where accused persons are represented by counsel, because it makes a big difference how, for example, somebody deals with a particular situation without any requests being made. But if there are concerns, even from the attorney's standpoint, you may make certain requests.
So the attorney can make a request of law enforcement to say that, we want.
Well, yeah. In other words, they can raise whatever concerns they have. Now, the thing is, and it's important to understand context here, because the criminal justice system and the civil justice system too, but it's an adversarial system. So in the criminal justice system, you have prosecution, and that's represented by the police and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, officials there. And then you have defense. You have defense counsel representing the accused. And if there are certain concerns that you have for whatever reason, then it's your duty to raise it with the prosecution, and there may be different approaches being taken from the normal approach because there was an intervention. It's like somebody who is arrested and charged. They might go to the police, and the police may ask questions, they may answer. Some police, you're supposed to read the rights of the individual. Those rights may or may not be read, and the individual who is not familiar with the law deals with it in a particular way, as opposed to, if advised by counsel, it is dealt with in a particular way. So the issue of bail, because I know that has been the central issue in this matter, and I've heard it said, listen, the officer got bail the same day, or he went in, he came out the same day, he got bail. And now I don't know the details of this matter. I've been out for a while, and probably it's better that I don't know. I've heard things unofficially, but the issue of bail and murder, first and foremost, in some countries there is no bail for murder. In many countries, like Grenada, you can get bail for murder. So bail is permissible just like any other offense. However, there is a distinction when the charge is murder. The magistrate's court cannot grant bail. So non-capital murder, which I understand the officer has been charged for, is a bailable offense, and it's an indictable offense. Now, if you notice, when the officer, just like most other people charged with indictable offenses, they went before the magistrate's court. And even when it's an indictable offense and the magistrate does not have jurisdiction or authority to determine whether that person is guilty or not guilty, but there are certain preliminary processes that takes place in the magistrate's court before it eventually goes up in the High Court, or it may even be discharged at the magistrate's court level. So the magistrate conducts a preliminary inquiry into the charge. Now, what the magistrate's court does not have jurisdiction or authority to do is to grant bail for murder, non-capital murder. So, for example, the officer appeared and the charge may or may not have been read, the preliminary procedures took place, but the magistrate did not have authority or does not have authority to grant bail for murder. What I suspected, and I don't know, I'm subject to correction, but what I suspected here, happened here, is that the attorney knows that the magistrate does not have the authority to grant bail for murder. So you're not waiting like another charge to see if the magistrate grants bail or not. Because if for another indictable offense that is not murder, if the magistrate does not grant bail, then you can go to the High Court for bail. But it must get first consideration before the magistrate's court. In this case, for non-capital murder, the magistrate can't consider it at all because she does not have jurisdiction. So what the attorneys may have done is, knowing that the magistrates cannot grant bail, they may have applied to the High Court for bail, more likely than not, there was no objection to bail because this is a police inspector. He does not have a criminal record. He's a police inspector, and that does not make him open to different adverse treatment because he's a police officer. He's entitled to bail like everybody else, and based on the circumstances which this unfortunate tragedy in Victoria occurred, more likely than not, the prosecution would not have objected to bail. So one, you have an application before the High Court beforehand, even before he's brought before the magistrate's court. Two, the prosecution not objecting to bail. Three, the High Court judge can consider that application on paper and grant it. So it is possible both for that police officer and others to get bail the same day, but there must be certain factors that must coincide in order for that to happen. For example, if there is an objection, as I say, I suspect there was no objection. But if there's an objection by the prosecution to bail, then the court has to do a hearing of the matter. And to do a hearing, they had to schedule it for a particular date, and somebody, unfortunately, spends time on remand. Because I say unfortunately here, because the presumption of innocence. And you know, at the end of the day, somebody might be found guilty. But at the end of the day, too, somebody spending months on remand in prison may be found not guilty, and their liberty denied because some court or the matter was taken to be punishment, pre-trial incarceration, punishment, when the punishment stage has not arisen as yet. So if this gentleman, the court sees him an inspector of police who he has no previous convictions, and taking all the factors into consideration, how the incident happened, most likely it was something spontaneous and not planned and premeditated. All these factors are taken into consideration, and you have the prosecution representing the state, the defense representing the accused, the prosecution not objecting to bail, the court considering the bail application on paper. I can see somebody being released on the same day.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Chaitan, I do know, yes.
Dr. Because working in the communities, in the schools, it is a concern, and that is the equal outlay of justice. You know, like a young man say, you know, I did something, and they want me to pay for it, and somebody else does something because of the profile or the position, they don't pay for it, right? I think it's important that justice be administered across the board. And so as the usual cliche or mantra we hear, if you do the crime, you do the time. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret my passion for being on one side of the fence, because here is a young man who fell to the bullet, right? There must be some kind of evidence for the inspector to be charged. So apparently, until we know what the facts are, or there's a suspicion, a mother is grieving today, right? A mother is grieving today. A community is grieving today, you know? Today's Mother's Day. And it's going to hit us emotionally, right? And so people would say, well, why did he get to pass at the back of the court when with me, they have to cover my head with my shirt, right? So it must be seen.
Or you would give a middle finger to the reporters in your handcuffs.
Right, right. It must be seen as though justice is served across the board if we are going to raise a fair and equitable society, right? So that's important. So your concern, Dr. Kellon Bubb, is verified, right? However, I must say that, you know, I have been, it's not now I've been doing what I'm doing. I've started in Toronto since 1990. And I led a big parade, an annual parade against violence in Toronto. And one of my slogans was, one bullet breaks two mothers' hearts. And I want us to think about it, because today a mother is grieving. A mother is grieving. When we get all emotional, when we want to drink or liquor, when we want to curse, and we want to behave in some kind of way, without thinking about what the repercussions could be. Now, a police officer probably whose mother saw him elevate and be promoted to the rank of an inspector. Now, if she's alive, I don't know what the situation. You don't want the Children's Mother's Day. Oh, where's my boy? What about the other one in Nonpareil? Wello'S mom. I lost my boy. So there's a lot of emotions involved. These kind of actions, not thinking about it, this kind of impulsive actions, which most times are led, again, I have to say it, by mind-altering substances, would have its repercussions in the end, and it wouldn't be nice. Today, we have two mothers grieving.
Yes.
Dr. Yes, Ruggles. Go ahead.
If I can come in quickly there, and I want to caution, I think I understand, because I know Dr. Chaitan well, but let me caution against the emotional. These things are not determined on the basis of emotions or it calls for revenge. Because it is a process that we have to follow. And remember that bail, these are principles of law that the court followed. And that's why the court itself can't sink into the emotional aspects of it. But more importantly, that's why education is important, because in the public's mind, they see somebody on bail as somebody released, right? Yeah. Somebody released, it's like that person not guilty. They're treating the person as if it's not guilty. And that's why it is important to understand the system. Because, again, when an accused is on trial, and especially with a serious offense, where jurors are not legally trained, they are just ordinary men and women of society, no training in law at all. But their knowledge of society can places them in a unique position because they live in a society. They are part and parcel of a society. And they are placed there to determine who's speaking the truth and who's not speaking the truth. No, the court will always caution against going on social media and hearing what people say on the side of the road and in the bus. That is not evidence. Evidence is what comes out in the court of law. And you use that, because if we use rumor and what X says or Y says, probably everybody will be found guilty because they're expressing a view people add on to the stories and so. So all I'm saying is that there is a system. And you know what really leads to the frustration? Because there is no consistency in a sense. Because some matters just take unduly long. You might make an application for bail this week, and the application is heard 4 weeks from now. Even you had a situation where, I've expressed my views on it, very strong views on it. There was the amendment to the Criminal Procedure Code that took away from the magistrate the power to grant bail or the authority to grant bail. Now, most of these matters are dealt with at the magistrate's court. They could try the matter, but they can't determine bail, which is a contradiction in itself. But then you are placing more pressure on an overworked system where the judges are overworked, and you say, take this and have it as an additional task. And somebody who is presumed to be innocent has to take 4, 5, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months before their bail can be considered and before they can be granted bail, because the system is so backed up. That is wholly unfair, because you are entitled to the presumption of innocence. The court might hear your application and refuse it because you have not met the principles for granting bail. So in this police officer's situation, being represented by counsel and everything, I suppose all was done to ensure that he comes out as quickly as possible. He had counsel. Now, in a same situation, tomorrow somebody might be waiting 3 months. So from a perception standpoint, people will see it as unfair. Now, it's not the policeman's fault that he got bail. He applied for bail, the court granted bail. And that is why we need to inject the kind of resources into the court system and ensure that magistrates have the jurisdiction to hear bail. They are competent as any judge, and probably more competent in those fields because they know the personalities that come before them from time to time, so that the system can run smoothly. Because what people fall victim to most times is a system in which there is inordinate delay, in which there is even a breach of the accuser's constitutional right to a fair trial within a reasonable time. Simply because, again, not the fault of the judicial officer, but that the system is so backed up. And we don't take these things into consideration. So who gets cursed? The judge gets cursed, the lawyer gets cursed, the legal system, everybody cries injustice. And I end by saying that is why public education and public sensitivity, and Kelon, that is why a program like this is so important, because you have to empathize with the victim and the victim's family. And naturally, they must feel outraged. And then there is the other side of it, in which a police officer is charged. And again, that police officer is entitled to certain rights, just like anybody else. And he is not at trial. Trial will determine whether he's guilty or not. But he's entitled to bail under the law, and he has been granted bail. So it should not be seen that, listen, he should not be granted in bail because whatever is the allegation made about him, and it's a serious allegation, so he should not be granted bail. That's not how the law operates. And I must say, let me end by, well, at least this part of it by saying that today is that policeman, tomorrow is somebody else's son or daughter. And that person would want bail. That, as I always say to police officers, when things happen to police officers, they want their full plenitude of rights discharged from constitutional rights otherwise. And it's the same they shouldn't afford to people who they deal with. And I many times use the example of somebody who was crying down the system. And in fact, I had a personal conversation with. And weeks after, that person called because their son got in trouble and was calling every minute of the day with a motherly instinct because you want to get your son out of trouble. You want to get your son bail. So we don't know who next it will happen to tomorrow. And I'm saying it is a system that we need to understand. And when we are in the seat where our sons and daughters or we ourselves are affected, then we sing a different tune.
Dr. Chaitan, I know you have to go because everyone has to go. So that's why we have an abbreviated program today. But I'll go over to you, sir, for some closing comments. And if you need to add anything to what Mr. Ferguson articulated.
Dr. Bubb, what we are considering here is a very unfortunate, sad situation.
Yeah.
And it was my pleasure to be discussing this with my friend, Mr. Ferguson, as he brings the judicial part to the discussion. However, I cannot hide the emotional part. And for some reason or the other, people act as the perception becomes their reality. And so that's why today is a very good day for this discussion. And I hope we can continue. And that's why I have to praise the officers that work along with me, because they actually sit by the road, sit in our sessions, and break these things down, Mr. Ferguson, for the young men on the block. So I think it's a teaching, learning experience. My heart goes out to the community of Victoria, Nonpareil. This gentleman, Wellington Welsh, he's spoken highly about, very, very highly about, a good man. I saw a picture with his son and his daughter, and my heart goes out to them. It's rather unfortunate. But I'm saying, by the same token, we all are human beings, and we could misstep. Let's be careful, as QC Ferguson said. We don't know who's going to be next. We don't know what situation we'll find ourselves in, where we might just react and have to deal with the bitter, lifelong consequences. So I will just end with my mantra over my head that a lot of Grenadians know. Always stop and think before you proceed. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Dr. Chaitan. Enjoy Mother's Day, your Mother's Day activity, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes. And Mr. Ferguson, before we let you go as well, we do want to get to some viewer comments. Of course, there were some comments there. Anthony Howard, I saw your comment. I'm not even going to go there. As former Prime Minister Dr. Mitchell would say, don't go there, to Callistra Faria. I'm not going to go there in respect of evidentiary things here, so I'm not even going to, with respect, sir. But Raymond Nurse is asking this, Mr. Ferguson. What are the criteria that determine the size or sum of bail? Is there a time limit for the duration of bail?
No. So bail, for example, bail, basically, in fact, let me back up to step one so the concept could be understood.
Yeah.
When you are arrested and charged, especially for an indictable offense, the issue is, should you be released on bail, or the alternative, should you be remanded in custody pending the hearing and determination of your matter? So bail usually extends to the end of your matter. You're on bail. If you're found guilty and you receive a prison sentence, then you are imprisoned. If you are found not guilty, then you are discharged. Everything ends there. If you are found guilty but do not receive a prison sentence, then the trial is ended. Bail extends up to the end of the trial. So you are released pending the hearing and determination of your matter. And in fact, our resources, if everybody charged had to go on remand, and that's an aside, a practical side of it, the prison is already overcrowded. Therefore, you have to take all of these factors into consideration. So most people, because the offenses are bailable, it is only if you're threatening witnesses, like some people who are have multiple convictions for different offenses. And you know one thing about some of them, they're always in court. They're always in court for the matter. These people will get bail, even though they may have had issues before. So bail extends to the end of your trial usually, but I must quickly add that your bail can be revoked if you do not comply with the bail conditions. Sometimes, in order to monitor the person, you might say report to the police station, the ex-police station, 3 times a week between the hours of 8 and 5, or once a week. Or there may not be that requirement. Every application is considered and determined on its own merits. The amount of bail, the more serious the charge generally, the higher the bail. And they sometimes again, as a deterrent to somebody who might possibly be a flight risk, but gets the benefit of the doubt from the court, you may have higher and more stringent bail conditions. In other words, the amount of the bail may be higher. So when you get in bail, you have 1 or 2 sureties, usually 2 sureties, or 1 if it's a simple summary offense. So bail ranges from $500 to, I've known bail to be close to $1 million bail. So it ranges. It depends on the circumstances, but a general principle for the purpose of the question would be that the higher or the more serious the offense, the more stringent the bail conditions and the higher the bail sum. You don't actually have to pay that amount of money into the court. So you might hear $500,000 bail, 2 sureties. What that means is that the sureties, and that again is another important point, because remember, bail is to secure your attendance at the court. You have undertaken that you will come to court on the day and days of your hearing. So therefore, if you don't come to court, then the sureties are responsible. And then they may be liable even up to the extent of which they stand bail to pay to the state. The money is forfeited. And of course, there has to be a trial for that. But your sureties, and it's important for sureties to understand that too, that you are responsible for making sure that the person for whom you have stood bail does not abscond. In other words, leave the country, not show up, because you become responsible in those circumstances.
Absolutely. Let us get to some other viewer comments. Let's see. There was another very interesting question here. Let me go up in let's go up in the chat here. Let's see. Okay, I think the viewer was asking in the context, I guess, of this situation, because the gentleman was an inspector of police, that he should have known better. So I think that the gist of the question that I saw was that should they not have been held to a higher standard in court, or does the court not take those things into consideration? And when I say higher standard here, I mean higher standards of accountability in the context of bail.
That is a matter for trial.
Oh,
that is a matter for trial when you're determining whether or not he's guilty. And that's why I made the point, and I will repeat, the considerations at trial for determining whether somebody is guilty or not are different from the considerations for determining whether somebody should get bail or not. It's completely different. And in fact, none of what I'm expressing here, I'm merely expressing what the law is.
What the law
says,
yes.
Right? Because the law says, listen, it's a serious presumption of innocence. And at the end of the day, what happens is a trial process in which the accused gets the opportunity to put his defense forward. And a court will consider the law, a court will consider, a jury considers the facts, and a determination is made. One cannot make a determination, and I certainly would not even think of doing so, because he's just charged. And he will have his day in court. Others will have their day in court. What we're dealing with here now is bail. So, of course, based on the circumstances of what happened, and I think the general comment you hear, it's an unfortunate one. And as the Prime Minister said, from the brief clip you played, again, what it must push us in the direction to, and the authorities that be, is looking at protocols. Looking at protocols of how you deal with these situations, how you deal with crowds. You know, there might be an absolute peaceful crowd, and just one person does something in that crowd that sets off a chain reaction, and ends in some tragedy. Just one person. And the issue of how it is dealt with there is largely determined by training. You have 4 police officers, you have a crowd of 4,000. I mean, I'm just using arbitrary numbers. How do you deal with a situation like that? How do you manage a situation like that? So the lesson, it's important irrespective of the details of this and the outcome, but it is important to also address that situation to prevent possible situations like these from occurring. And as I said, I would not comment on it because I'm not too sure of all the details and the relevant details. And I'm sure that will come out in court when the prosecution presents their case and the defense answers to that charge.
Right, yes. There is another question here from Samuel James. He says, some people are on permanent bail, quote unquote, and are continuing to be granted bail for numerous offenses while committing more crimes, many times for the same type of crime. They are seemingly untouchable and act accordingly. And I just want to add an addendum to that. One of the gentlemen who is accused of the death of the yacht, the vacationing yachty's hair, he was on bail, right? And actually he was about to head to court again, where another bail hearing might have occurred. So let us talk about that, Ruggles, in the context of the discretion of the judge. At what point would a judge say, look, you know, you've been here several times as a repeat offender for this, I'm not going to grant bail? Or is it a case that the judge has to, the first default setting is granting bail?
Well, let me put it this way. There's a presumption in favor of bail, a legal presumption in favor of bail. However, that presumption is rebuttable. And what I can say about in relation to the comment made, that some people just continue to commit offenses and they get bail. What I can say as a general principle is the more frequent you are as a visitor to the court charged with crimes, and especially crimes you have been convicted for, of the same nature, is the more difficult it would be to get bail. So, but it's not that you cannot get bail, because bail is not pretrial punishment. There is no such concept as pretrial punishment. Punishment comes after somebody is found guilty of an offense. So there is the presumption in favor of bail. However, if you are granted bail and a court determines, based on the evidence before it, and of course the prosecution would make its own submissions, that you are unlikely to turn up for your trial, then you wouldn't get bail. If in a pending bail application before the court, it is shown that you have been threatening witnesses, you have threatened witnesses, and you're likely to continue to threaten the witnesses who are to appear on your trial, at your trial, you would get bail. If you are likely to be a flight risk, and there's a likelihood that you may leave the country and abscond, you wouldn't get bail. If you have a situation where, for example, somebody has a history of getting bail in the past and not coming up for their trial, you won't get bail. If you have a situation where you have people who continue to commit certain offenses, have been found guilty for those offenses, they have a long, as it's called, rap sheet, and you charge now with the same offense, chances are you wouldn't get bail. Every matter is dealt with based on the facts and circumstances of each particular case. What I am saying are the principles that apply, and those are the general principles that apply. So at the end of the day, yes, it might be murder, but one is entitled to bail for murder. One can get bail for murder. You have several murder accused who have been granted bail. You have murder accused who have been found guilty, and you have murder accused who have been found not guilty. You have had people on remand at the Richmond Hill prison for years, and after the trial, they have been found not guilty. It is that delicate balance that you have to try to create, because those are, you know, the rule of law principles. Until the law changes, that's what the law is. We may have our own strong, very strong individual views, and those views would be expressed even more passionately when there is an incident. And as I always say, we have a role, we have a responsibility, each one of us, as part of the organizations we belong to. In my case, the Bar Association, and I've advocated a lot for the kind of peace initiative that we have embarked on, to go to schools, to speak to students, to get the energies of students positively channeled. All of these things, because all of them contribute to crime. at the end of the day. We don't wait until the crime happens and then react, and then after we cool down and wait until the next one and react again. Let us try to build society brick by brick to do the things that would possibly reduce crime. That would reduce, again, the police operate. I fight with the police on a regular basis because we operate an adversarial system in court with the prosecution. But again, we have good prosecutors. We have great prosecutors. We have great police officers. And then there are bad apples always in the bunch. But the police themselves have difficult jobs to do. And that is why it is important that we ensure, and the authorities ensure, one, that the police have that relationship with the public. Because, you know, when there is that connection with the public, you know, somebody behaving bad, even in the community, just a word with the person could make a big difference. And so how you deal with it, the connections with the public, these are things you have to grow over a period of time, grow and deepen over a period of time. Training, how to deal with crowd control. Because the police themselves, at times, their lives are at risk, seeking to protect other members of society. So it's really a delicate balance, and it's always a wake-up call. When unfortunate incidents like these happen, that reminds us of the important things that we all need to do from the different perspectives from which we come.
Yeah. Absolutely. One last question here, and then I'll go over to you for some closing comments, because you know, it's Mother's Day and I want to give folks time to enjoy their moms today. What about the case of capital murder? Is bail granted because all cases of murder are not the same? Is that taken into consideration, Ruggles?
Yes, bail, remember, only within the last 10, 12 years, there was the distinction between non-capital murder and capital murder. A major distinction is capital murder has to do with murder or killing committed in what is deemed to be an aggravating situation. So you might have a robbery and from rape or killing, brutal killing. It might involve a police officer, and so. So the difference, action murder attracts the death penalty. Capital murder will attract a more serious sentence than a non-capital murder. A non-capital murder would not have the aggravating features that a capital murder would have. Nonetheless, it is possible to have bail in either circumstances. And remember, bail is not just giving a man bail. So bail is a process, is a judicial process in which a judge or magistrate has to exercise a judicial discretion. And I say judicial because you have to take into account the principles that govern bail before you actually grant bail. So, and at times, in many instances, especially when it's outside of murder, there won't even be an objection to bail. And bail, you don't even require an application for it, because when you are arrested, even at the station, the police officer can call the magistrate because they have no objection to bail, and the magistrate sets the bail, the amount of bail, the bail conditions, and that person is processed there and then and gets bail without having to go to court. You may have to go to court because one, even where the prosecution does not object to bail, but the person may be brought to court because the court would wish to set conditions to the bail. So you bring the person to court, and generally now when there is an objection to bail, you have to bring the person to the court as soon as reasonably practicable, because you can only send somebody to the prison when there's a warrant issued by the court to accept them in the prison. The police can't just send them to prison so on remand. The court has to do it. So it's a process in which the prosecution might be objecting to bail and the defense may be requesting bail. The magistrate determines whether the person gets bail or not. In many instances, you have the prosecution does not object, the defense requests bail, and bail is granted. Sometimes even the court may have, because the discretion of the court may have issues and might even say no bail, though that is an exceptional circumstance where you have both sides agreeing.
Absolutely. Now, Ruggles, before we get to closing comments, of course, this week, last week rather, Grenada made representation at the 2025 Universal Period Review of the Grenada Human Rights Report. Of course, there was that meeting that was held in Geneva, Switzerland on the 5th of May. Now, some of the recommendations from that peer-reviewed country peer-reviewed process offered by Iceland, the UK, Peru, the Philippines, Nepal, the Netherlands, and Latvia, who looked at Grenada's human rights report, they suggested getting rid of a couple items in the criminal code, one of which is abolishing the death penalty. Second of which is adopting a reproductive rights health policy that would include granting abortion access. Of course, the other issue that came up here is the issue of the buggery laws, again, which, look, it's not really enforced. And it's interesting with a lot of our laws in the laws of Grenada, a lot of those laws are not enforced, but they're holdovers from a colonial period. Has the Bar Association ever adopted a position, especially in respect of the death penalty question? Because the death penalty, you sentence to death, right? You can be sentenced to death in Grenada's jurisdiction, but it's not really enforced, is it?
Right, yes.
So,
but theoretically you can. Theoretically you can, because it's under. Yes, theoretically you can. It's just that the approach changed in about 2000, emerging from a case from the Privy Council, initially a case from the Eastern Caribbean, Spence and Hughes. It was a consolidated appeal, meaning the appeal was on the same legal question. So it was heard as one appeal before the Privy Council. And before, prior to 2000, when somebody is on a charge of murder, if the person is found guilty, or if the person was found guilty, then the automatic sentence for murder was death. So there was no, irrespective of who, there was no what you call mitigation, which ironically, even afforded for a cus case. You can mitigate and persuade the court why a person shouldn't get a prison sentence, or why a person should get the lightest possible sentence. However, for murder, it was automatic. But that changed in 2000 because the court held, our courts too, and it was upheld by the Privy Council, that the automatic application of the death penalty was unconstitutional and amounted to cruel and inhuman punishment. So you can't automatically sentence somebody to death, and it's reserved for what would be referred to as the worst of the worst cases, but in all practicality, it's abolished. It's just really on the books, because in most countries, it has not been carried out, and all scientific studies show. I know there's a whole emotional debate and emotion surround it, especially when you have new issues arising. But most of the countries, including Zimbabwe in Africa, have removed the death penalty from the books within the last year. And that is the trend internationally. And as a matter of fact, countries that retain the death penalty will face their own kind of sanctions from European and other countries that have abolished the death penalty. It has become a big issue relating to human rights. But what is important, again, in the approach to these issues is really, public engagement, public education on the process. But I certainly applaud the announcement that there are those initiatives coming from Grenada, and certainly initiatives that I'm sure other countries would follow. It's a matter of time before it is formally abolished on the books. It has been abolished in practice. And even the offense of burglary, people are not charged for that and charged in the context of
the question is,
consent.
How do you enforce how do you enforce that law? I mean, are you going to go into people's bedrooms? I mean, I think it's,
right.
it's also a question.
Again, that's the point. There are whole set of constitutional issues associated with it, and again, because there are some topics that evoke a lot of passion because people have different sides, have extreme positions on it. But the law protects the minority, because that's what the law is there to do. It's not mob rule.
Protect you from mob rule, yes.
Yes, so the Constitution protects minority rights. The Constitution protects the marginalized, the disadvantaged. It is what is supposed to put you on an equal footing. So the majority may come down on you for whether it's particular lifestyles or whatever. But the trend internationally and the statistics, for example, in relation to the abolition of the death penalty, the statistic, the majority of nations have abolished the death penalty.
Ruggles, again, thank you so much for always being willing, ready, and able to grace us with your knowledge and to educate the public on these issues of national concern and national interest. So some closing comments, and of course I'll be seeing you on Thursday, sir.
Yes, certainly. And again, let me commend you on that initiative. And again, you know what it really shows? That what we can do as individuals, as organizations, everybody depends on governments or whatever, or on handouts. Because we have grown so accustomed to it. Handouts from outside, aid, or on governments to do everything. And the easiest thing is to criticize. The easiest thing is to identify what the problem is. The hardest thing, of course, is to solve the problem. And we have a civic responsibility, as I always say, to make society a better place. That's simply put. And there are things that we can do. And for example, at Bar Association, the Grenada Bar Association has the longest running public education lecture series in the entire Commonwealth. Not just in Grenada, in the Caribbean. And what we try to do from where we are is to encourage other countries to do so that, the public can be armed and understand laws, could understand our constitution, because these are things that guide us, and to provide platforms too for debate. So you see these call-in programs, people can call in, vent their frustrations. We can agree to disagree. We can agree on certain things, but we all have an important role to play. And what I do hope with the initiative that you have started, and that is going to start next week from the 5th anniversary, is that you can make this lecture series an annual lecture series. I hope the next one is not for the 10th anniversary and the third one for the 15th anniversary, but that you make it because it's on important topics that would educate and enlighten our people, and from speakers who represent the best as far as expertise in the region on it. And that's precisely what the Archibald Net Memorial Lectures were designed to do. So I just say that for simply saying, in our communities, in the respective areas of our profession, we can do what we can do as trade unionists, as Chamber of Commerce, as civil society organizations. We can do small things that have a significant impact on society, and to make society a better place, so that we'll have less of the occurrences that we have in areas like as crime, for example, where people flare up at the end, when in a sense the life cannot be brought back. Let us try to save the life.
Absolutely. Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, thank you so much, sir, for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Thank you.
Viewers and listeners, we just had a very important conversation there with Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, and of course before him with Dr. Neil Streiton, and we were really debriefing the tragic incident that occurred in Victoria at the St. Mark's Day Festival, in which one of their very beloved community members, Wello, lost his life so tragically, so shockingly, with that shooting incident involving an inspector of police. Some in the public are saying that as an inspector of police, he should have known better given his rank and given his experience in law enforcement. Of course, there's also the conversation about whether bail should be granted in the context of the ways in which this has happened. Another variable that came up with this has to do with the other people who were involved in this, who have not been held accountable. Again, allegedly here, there's allegation that there were some young people involved in some violent and deviant activity that sort of led to that escalation that we saw that ended Wello's life so tragically. So, folks, thank you so much for watching this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Again, we want to remind you of our inaugural Future Forward Summit that's happening at the Grenada Trade Center Annex Thursday, the 15th of May. Actually, it's this coming Thursday. It's a new week from today. At 6 p.m., it starts with a reception followed by the formal program at 7 p.m. So we hope to see as many of you there, especially those of you who watch the Bubb Report regularly. We hope to see you there for that as well. And of course, on behalf of our producers, we want to take this opportunity as well to wish all the mothers of the national community a happy Mother's Day. Again, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing all of you a pleasant week ahead, and we'll see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.